What's going on, everyone? Lauren Sisler here with AL.com. Got Cole Cubelic, our SEC insider today. He's with Three Man Front on Jocks Radio as well as the SEC Network. He's always in prime time. You can catch him there with Tom Hart and Jordan Rogers. Cool people there. So we're going to talk a little SEC football. Why wouldn't we, right? It's SEC Insider, okay? So we're talking about the shakeup in Week 7. Georgia, South Carolina. Georgia suffering its first loss of the season, double overtime, 20-17. What did you see in this game? What surprised you most, and what does this mean moving forward?
Ugly game, really. I mean, neither team, I thought, played an extremely clean game. South Carolina obviously did not turn the ball over. That ended up being huge for them. I think that's why they could stay in this game and then ultimately win this game. But you had the guy that a lot of people assume is the best kicker in college football miss 2 big kicks down the stretch in Rodrigo Blankenship for Georgia. You had a Georgia offensive line that did have some issues. There were some cracks in the foundation, so to speak, and they let a couple of things happen. But Javon Kinlaw, defensive tackle for South Carolina, is one of the most dominant players in college football. I think he and Derrick Brown are the 2 most destructive interior defensive linemen in college football. And you got a very uncharacteristic game from quarterback Jake Fromm. I thought the worst game of his collegiate career. Just made poor decisions, didn't look like himself. And then obviously you give credit to a couple of the South Carolina defensive backs for making a couple different plays and obviously changing the outcome of that game. But I'm not going to say that I thought Georgia sleptwalked through this game or Georgia was looking ahead to the next game. I think South Carolina beat them. Now, did Georgia do some things that made that a little bit easier? Yeah, absolutely that they did. But I don't think Georgia's out of it. I think now you look at South Carolina in a different way and you say they might be able to get to 7 wins, not just be able to become bowl eligible, which most of us doubted could happen before this game. Yeah. So it was an interesting game. And it's one that I think if Georgia doesn't make some proper adjustments moving forward, they're going to run into more trouble down the road.
So, Cole, you said that there are cracks in the offensive line for Georgia. Cracks, though, a lot of people are saying they got destroyed. Your thoughts?
All right, so this general public
He's about to come at me, y'all.
Of the Georgia offensive line just sort of got their ass kicked for the entire game is just not something I'm okay with. I can't allow that. I'm not going to allow it. And I'll say this, Javon Kinlaw was destructive. Did he get 5 or 6 plays where he made people look bad? Yeah, absolutely. Whether it was on Trey Hill, whether it was on Ben Cleveland, he got pressure, he made plays in the backfield, he made things happen. We're talking about a Georgia offense that played 95 plays. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to allow you to take a missed assignment by Ben Cleveland that led to a tackle for loss, or Andrew Thomas getting beat in pass protection, or those other 4 to 6 Javon Kinlaw plays and say, that tells the story of what Georgia did for the entire game, because it's not the case. You can't take 10% of a body of work and say, that's what we're going to write on the cover of this novel and say that's exactly how it went down. Because what I saw when I turned the game on was double team movement at the point of attack. I saw DeAndre Swift going for 7, going for 12, going for 13, going for 4. I saw a lot of good second down situations that Jake Fromm was in. And I think Jake Fromm got a little bit cute in this game. I think he came to the line of scrimmage, felt like he had to change something on every play. Too many perimeter throws. Too many times he had run looks that he got out of them. Did you see Jake Fromm keep his own read in this game? I didn't see him keep one to keep the backside of the defense honest. And how about when Jake Fromm did drop back to pass? Now, there were a couple pressures, but I saw Jake Fromm get through his entire progression reads on almost every drop back and then had a chance to go look for something else and still either found pressure or was sacked. So there's plenty of blame to go around for this performance. The Georgia offensive line was not great, but they by no stretch of the imagination were miserable. Jake Fromm deserves blame. James Coley deserves blame. Kirby Smart deserves blame. You cannot throw out the Georgia offensive line and say they just got destroyed in this game. That's why Georgia lost. That's not real.
Cole Cubelic fired up. Let's go! All right, so we're going to talk about Florida, LSU. Florida getting beat 42-28 was the final score there. Overall thoughts on that game? Any surprises?
I was a little surprised with the Florida offense. I mean, you put up 28 points. I thought Dan Mullen had a nice plan. Offensive line didn't play great. They weren't going to get the run game going, especially when you look at the fact that the majority of that front 7 for LSU was back. Glenn Logan was back. Rashard Lawrence was back. Divinity was in the lineup. Caleb Chason had an excellent game for LSU. They weren't going to be able to get that going. They don't run the ball well enough for that to happen. Some questionable play calls late, but I thought Kyle Trask did most of the things he was asked to do. Dan gave him pretty simple throws, easy reads. He connected on those. Offensive line held up for the most part. There were some breakdowns late, and I felt like they found a way to get the ball in their playmakers' hands, and they made some plays. Now, defensively, I think it's only fair to say with Jabari Zuniga out for a lot of that game and Jonathan Grenard out for most of that game, it was going to be very difficult for Florida to find a way to win that game because you needed to take advantage of mismatches on the outside to force Joe Burrow to do things that he's not comfortable doing, whether that's getting the ball out quick, whether that's taking hits, and whether that's moving around in the pocket and potentially forcing incomplete or errant passes, which Joe Burrow is still comfortable with that a lot of the times. He can still move around and do some different things. So the LSU plan was phenomenal. One guy that deserves a ton of credit is Thaddeus Moss, tight end. He had an excellent game in pass protection, catching the football, and in the run game. LSU did a nice job of scouting what Auburn did to Florida and had success with. The split zone or insert zone where Auburn would take the H-back and run a zone play and bring him back in between the middle of the line of scrimmage and let him block up on a linebacker. LSU saw that and they ran it, and Moss had an excellent day climbing up to the linebackers. That's one reason the run game got going, and it was a good plan. Joe Burrow played lights out, 21-24. He's got two of the best receivers in college football. If you're going to beat LSU, you're going to have to score, I think, 45 points, 55 points to be able to find a way to win, no matter how good your defense is, because Florida has a really good defense.
Okay, real quick as we close things out, as you look at the landscape heading into Week 8, what you learned from this weekend, obviously from the Georgia loss, obviously LSU putting up some big numbers against Florida. What does this mean for, I guess, the postseason in the SEC at this point?
It changes a lot, and I think the key word that you said there is postseason.
Right.
Now let's take that word and what other meaning does that have right now? Because there's a team that sits atop the SEC East that has a postseason ban right next to their name right now. The Missouri Tigers are in first place in the SEC East.
Correct.
The Missouri Tigers can also not go to Atlanta to participate in the SEC Championship game right now.
Correct.
The Missouri Tigers get Georgia in November on the road and Florida at home the next week in mid-November, a team that they have destroyed the past 2 years. The Missouri offense looks pretty good right now. Now, losing Cale Garrett at linebacker is going to hurt them.
Yeah, that's not
Big
good.
Playmaker, not going to help. But they are, when you look at their next 3 games, there's a great chance that they're going to be a one-loss football team. That only loss coming to Wyoming in the opener when they travel to Athens, Georgia to play the Bulldogs. And that's going to come just after Georgia and Florida have played. So Missouri could technically control their path to the SEC Championship game, which they may not actually – they kind of don't control their own path because they might not be able to go even if they're the team that, from a record perspective, deserves to be there.
Good point there. He's Cole Cubelic. Thank you so much for your insight, as always. And for all your updates, SEC football, Alabama, Auburn, well, you can visit us on AL.com.